everybody, what is going on? So in this video, I brought along DisneyFamilyMan23 and VashSky, host of Freshly Squeezed here on Orange Grove 55. We're going to talk about a ton of stuff today. The Variety article about Chapek and the restructuring. We're going to talk about the earnings report. We're going to get into masks or the lack thereof. We have a lot to discuss here. Mr. Freshly Squeezed, VashSky, welcome back to the channel, my friend.
Great to be here. I am super excited to get into this. The news cycle was so tightly packed at the end, so we've got a lot to discuss and fresh on it.
Yes. And DisneyFamilyMan23, welcome aboard, sir.
Thanks for having me on again.
Perfect. So let's dive into this. So first, we're going to talk about this Variety article that dropped the day before the earnings call, okay? So this Variety article talks about the restructuring that took place back in October. And this, it was kind of a, I wouldn't say a scathing report, but it was kind of eye-opening, right? And it talks largely about how, there's changes in the distribution process. And there's been a lot of anxiety online over this article, which I really don't understand. And I might be missing something here. But Dre, I want to start with you first. What are your thoughts on this Variety article about the restructuring and how it's going to affect the Walt Disney Company as a whole?
Well, I think the Variety article to me sounds like maybe it's a little bit of an outlet from creators who don't who feel that the dynamic between creative and executive are changing. It goes into saying that, well, certain executives were placed into leadership roles, and a lot of people took that as, oh, well, you're taking those roles away from creatives. And essentially, yes, that is happening. But again, it's we're going through here a very transformational process for the Disney company on two fronts. One is the CEO just got changed. Obviously, he's going to have his own kind of priorities, his own kind of managerial style. He's going to bring in his guys that he feels comfortable with leading in these executive roles, and that will trickle down to the company and will change the company on its own. But then you have the pandemic, and we all know that Disney is a brand that has been disproportionately affected by it in a big way. I mean, we'll get into the earnings call later, but they've lost billions over all of this. And so right now it's really a time of real streamlining and changes to how things are being done, not just because it's a new CEO that's involved, but really they have to survive.
Yeah, exactly. And it is. It's this is the biggest seismic shift in Hollywood in my lifetime. I mean, this is a huge change of how they operate. Now, John Campea, which I'm a huge fan of, I watch his show pretty much almost every day. I love John Campea, but he did a video yesterday that really surprised me, talking about this change basically being like, on making Disney on the path to disaster, essentially. This is a terrible decision. And you sent me yesterday, Dre, this article from October, which was, kind of outlining what this restructuring really was about. I'm going to go ahead and share this with you guys. And it says here, this is from October, and this is what this new restructuring of this distribution entails. It says here, separating distribution from content production will allow Disney to be more nimble when deciding how and where to release films and series. Disney chief executive Bob Chapek said in an interview. The new system, he noted, will allow creative executives to focus on what they do best, making movies and TV shows, and let others at the company worry about how the content goes out to the world. I mean, I don't see how that's an issue, and I don't really see how, like, Campea was kind of making the argument that this is going to hurt the creative side. I don't see that. I mean, this feels like a distribution thing that is after the fact, right? Like after they make the content, this Kareem Daniel, who's chairman of Disney Media and Entertainment, his group is going to decide where this stuff goes. it's really after the creative process. So I'm not sure how it affects the creatives all that much, and I could be missing something. But George, what are your thoughts on this? What are your feelings on this change to this distribution structure? How are you feeling on this?
Well, I think it kind of goes back, if y'all remember, when Netflix started their streaming service, and Steven Spielberg had a little bit of a choice words on the notion of, having more films in cinema. Why is it bypassing and going straight to the streaming and what have you? So I think it has a lot to do with almost like a sense of pride, with the creator of saying, okay, well, this is my baby. This is how I want it distributed. This is how I want it released. But if you go back even to the early days of cinema, that each person has their own role play, so to speak, of getting that film out. Like when you hand it off to the editor has a type of vision of how they want it cut frame by frame and how it would to be representative. Now, a lot of times film directors do some of their own editing, like Robert Rodriguez, or I think Quentin Tarantino does a lot of his own editing. But it's to the notion of where I think that I really don't think it hinders the product itself. I think it's more so to the notion that it would give actually more people jobs, especially nowadays, like within the pandemic and what have you, that, a lot of jobs were taken away. And I think it's like once you hand off the film to the notion of other people, that, it's honestly, you're basically giving a hope and a prayer that, they do it justice. And that even goes back to George Lucas with American Graffiti. The company wanted him to do what they wanted to do with his own movie. And I think he used a quote of saying that if you have your child and they tell you to cut off one of their fingers, it's like, well, you still have your child, but you're just one fingerless child. Right. That's what it was like to him, to have someone tell him what to do with his film. So I can kind of see it go both ways of how a person would feel, but at the same time, I think it's a little bit more to bite off than they can chew, as far as like getting it from the creative standpoint to the distribution part.
Well, and you brought up a great point with Steven Spielberg and streaming. And that really does play a big part here. Anytime, and not just in this situation, but really anytime you have the passing of the torch, when you go from the old guard to the new guard, there's always friction. We saw this when there was that transitional period between Walt's guys, in the studio, and they were kind of transitioning to the new generation of the Renaissance era, artists and what have you. And there was that friction with that as well. We saw it again when it came to, when CGI was coming in to the mainstream, and that was the new guard, and it was phasing out the old guard, which was hand-drawn animation. There's always that friction. And I think a lot of what you're seeing here with Hollywood is that passing from the old guard to the new guard. The old guard is a very theater experience driven Hollywood, which is dead. I mean, the theater experience is going to stick around, but the days of the theater being the primary focus of revenue for these studios is gone. It's never coming back. And I think you're seeing a lot of bruised egos and friction because of that. What are your thoughts, Dre, on the old guard, new guard, in terms of Hollywood in general?
Yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of that playing out for sure. I think here, I think more than that, though, I think it really is the dynamic changing. How much control do creatives have over their work versus the executives over their work? I think, and you mentioned the Renaissance era. There was this kind of friction between creative and executive with Jeffrey Katzenberg and Roy Disney, and all of those, for a lot of those films. I know there were multiple disagreements with Lion King or Pocahontas and Beauty and the Beast and so forth, where executives kind of would step in and go, well, wait a minute, we got to change this. This isn't right. This isn't correct with our viewers or our audience. And that was certainly some tug and pull there, but I think it amounted to better films.
Right.
You know, one of the underrated stories here is that when creatives have full control, sometimes they're not most in tune with Disney's audience. They're not most in tune with where Disney wants to maybe go sometimes. And so I think this kind of streamlining here is a lot about, you know, I mean, let's face it, creatives, a creative-driven kind of industry like this with creative-driven product, I think it amounted to a lot of maybe bloat in some areas. You know, I know that production costs were just going higher and higher and higher, and sometimes you got to rein some of that in. That's what happened with Rider Rabbit. Actually, speaking of that Renaissance time, Jeffrey Katzenberg comes in and says, "Hey, look, we got to put you know, kind of a rein in on some of this stuff because we're just spending crazy amounts of money that we'll never be able to get back." So it's a little bit of that. It's a little bit of creative focus, and you know, it's Chapek wanting to put his spin on it. So between all those things, yeah, I can see how creatives are rubbed kind of the wrong way about it and want to go to an outlet like Variety to get some of these things out into the mainstream. But again, these now some of these changes have to occur just because of the times we're in.
Right. Exactly. And you brought up a great point, Ray, about how there is that kind of back and forth between the creatives and like the kind of the more business-minded people in the company. And that goes back to the Walt and Roy days of their relationship even. You know, it's been a Disney thing since the beginning, day one, you know?
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I think, you know, Bob Iger was very creatively driven. And not that he was a creative person in himself, but he understood that creatives drive the product. They drive the industry, the direction of the company, and so forth. And with his ideas when he came in 2005 and what he wanted to do, he understood that he needed to infuse creatives into the company, and that's what he did with the acquisition of Pixar and so forth. And I think what Campy was talking about, I mean, he lays out like 4 points
Right.
of where Bob Iger's style may differ from Bob Chapek's. But again, there are advantages to that and there are disadvantages. And I think Chapek is a much more, I want to say, maybe a little bit more cost focused.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
numbers that.
and he's also entering into a new realm with Disney Plus into uncharted waters. And so I think between those is where you get these executives being placed into these roles.
Yeah, absolutely. So now we're going to pivot to the earnings report that came out a few days ago. So overall, I mean, from what I gathered, it looks like theme parks did very well, but the big sticking point for Wall Street was the miss on the Disney Plus forecast. They didn't quite hit that 109 million subs that Wall Street was expecting. George, what are your thoughts on the earnings report overall? You know, whether it be the Disney Plus subscriber miss, the theme parks, which look like they doubled the revenue, I guess. I mean, they did very well. But what are your thoughts on this?
I think as far as everything that Disney had to handle over the past year, I think actually it is more of the expectation. It's decent. You know, it's not exactly the numbers that they're used to, but given to the current situation of the hand that Disney was dealt with, I think it's pretty much safe to say that they're on the track to get back to where they were, of how they were back in 2018, 2019, and what have you. But I think more so, I think we're speaking of Disney Plus, I think it's more in the notion of, because Disney Plus had such a higher trend of saying, okay, the expectations are so high that it's exceeding expectations, and it's now it kind of dipped down a little bit, and people are saying, oh my gosh, you know, now Disney Plus is like starting to fall behind. I don't really see it that way. I really, you know, for the goal of being 109 million, and it what it do 103. I mean, that's still pretty good. And you also have to think too, there is a time frame with Disney Plus of, depending on how much content is being released on it, you know, and what that content is. I think once Loki comes out and more of the Star Wars franchise streaming shows and everything, I think that will put a better perspective in the coming years for Disney Plus. Now, as far as the parks go, I think, especially now, which we'll get into it as far as like with the mask mandate and everything, I think, in my opinion, this couldn't have come at a better time between the CDC and the earnings report, because it's like after getting those numbers, now Disney has an opportunity to say, you know what, if we got decent earnings now, once this mask mandate is lifted, given the next quarter couple earnings, it's definitely going to soar. And that's my opinion.
Absolutely. VashSky, what are your thoughts on this earning report numbers?
So we see here, I mean, look, they're going to be down. A lot of that's driven by the parks, actually. Apparently, they were operating at a $406 million loss from this last quarter here. It's been a great revenue stream, but it's also if it's not running 100%, it's going to be a drag, and I think that's what we're seeing here with that. You also look at just to kind of mirror George's points when it comes to the Disney Plus subscriber numbers. Again, I think what they did here to find that 10 million figure that analysts were looking for was they looked at Disney's projected goals of 230 to 260 million by the end of Q4 2024, and they kind of divided the remaining time they have left, starting from this last quarter to then, which is about 15 quarters, and that's how you get like the 10 million subscriber number per quarter. Again, these things though don't work linearly in that way, especially with Disney's strategy. Disney wants to open up a new markets and incrementally grow those after they've launched. And as a result, you're going to see these come in waves. They're not going to come linearly. It's not going to be just a growth of 10 million per quarter. It really is going to be, sometimes some quarters you're going to get like 30 million. Other quarters, you might get 5 or 6. So I think that's kind of what we're seeing here. And I think the analysts kind of have this a little bit wrong. I would be far more concerned if, say, maybe 7 quarters later, we don't have, it doesn't look like those goals are going to be achieved. Right now, we're only 1 of 15 in. I wouldn't be too concerned with that.
Well, and they also just released the slate of things that's going to be coming to Disney Plus, as far as like within the theaters and the premiere access. You have Black Widow, Shang-Chi, The Jungle Cruise. Luca's going to actually premiere free on Disney Plus. So, I mean, like, there's a lot of things, on the horizon that just in that amount of time frame, it could boost up within a couple months or so.
Yeah, that's a great point. Remember, we didn't have a year of regular releases that made its way on Disney Plus. So a lot of the content and a lot of the value that people may have, kind of foreseen for Disney Plus really hasn't been realized yet.
Yeah, absolutely. And this quarter was a huge change in the pandemic, in that the vaccines rolled out, I think, in February. A lot of stuff started to reopen, like movie theaters and what have you. And
I'm sorry, not to cut you off. There's one more thing I also wanted to add to the parks part, that they were down 104.6 million, but you also have to take into consideration Disneyland just reopened, so they didn't have Disneyland for that whole year span, and then the cruise line is still closed. Alani's just picking up. Adventures by Disney is just picking up. So, when a lot of people say, "Oh, the parks division," but there's other stems to that than just the actual theme parks themselves. A lot of the Disney hotels on the property are starting to reopen. Restaurants are starting to reopen. So the more that the things are starting to, come back to normal, so to speak, that will definitely impact for the next quarter.
Yeah. There's this quarter, as things reopen, there was less of a need to have that in-home entertainment like there was, say, 6 months, 8 months, 9 months ago. People are now, living their lives and going to theaters and doing stuff. So it kind of made sense that Disney Plus would lose a little steam. The growth would kind of slow down a little bit during this whole period when our economies are reopening again. And to the point about the theme parks, I think they still doubled expectations though for what Wall Street was initially expecting. So I think they did. I think it did operate at a loss, but I do believe that it still did better than they were expecting. So that's good news.
Like you said, the need for DTC content or direct-to-consumer content has kind of waned a little bit, and so I think we'll see those numbers pick up as more content is released and as more content makes its way to Disney Plus and as new markets are introduced. But moving on to the parks, apparently $406 million operating loss, but the parks that did open, to George's point, did achieve a net positive contribution. So meaning that of the parks that were open, they did contribute. They weren't drags on the company. I think the big thing that we're seeing is the loss of Disneyland Paris and the loss of Disneyland in California. And because of those, that's what's really being the drag on the company. I mean, just Disneyland itself being closed for 412 days, like we've said before, $4.3 billion loss for the company. That's going to be significant, but per guest spending at Walt Disney World and stuff like that increased by double digits, 10%, which is good.
Yeah.
That doesn't make up for the loss of capacity and how much, if all those guests were in there, you'd like them all to be up by 10% and all those things. It doesn't quite make up for that. And look, the Disney company has lost billions and billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars from this whole thing. And as Chapek kind of noted there right at the tail end, they're going to want their money back, and looks like they're going to be going after annual pass holders next.
Interesting. Let's segue into that. I'm glad you brought that up, Dre. Let's segue into that. I do see on here on the screen share, it says a new AP program mentioned as a quote unquote affinity or quote unquote loyalty program, not governed by legacy. VashSky, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, if you look at Chapek's precise comments, let's see if I have them here.
Okay.
Oh, nope, they're not here. But so he essentially says, look, our value statement was incorrect. We want to do something more in line with what our shareholders want, and for the guest experience we provide. That, in so many words, he's saying there's going to be a realignment here. The all-you-can-eat buffet style of the annual pass holder system as it existed is probably going to be gone.
It went with all the other buffets.
Exactly. Yeah, no, that's true. If you look at it, we've talked about this before in our last segment that we did with George on his channel. We talked about the price increases for the parks and how annual pass holders are really getting quite a good deal if you pay by the month versus if you pay by the day.
Right.
And because of that, because of their disproportionate level of access, because of how they use the parks and treat them, it's just that balance is incorrect for where they want to be. And unfortunately, for a lot of the day guests who are spending so much, their experience may have been hindered by guests who are locals, who go on a fairly regular basis and take up some of the amenities that those higher paid guests are expecting.
And Vash, this is a great opportunity. This is a great opportunity for Disneyland Resort to sort of recalibrate, so to speak, because since the monthly pass payments for the annual passes, Disneyland Resort has become really, like you touched upon, like it's like a locals hangout, where people come and go, and it's like almost like the local mall almost, right? I mean, everyone just kind of pops in and out. With this new AP program, which he says something to the effect of it, Chapek, something to the effect of it being like a frequent buyer program or something like that, wasn't it? Something to that effect?
Yeah, he didn't say those words specifically, but when you think loyalty program, you kind of think, okay, well, wait a minute. What this kind of changes the dynamic here. And what I was kind of thinking in my head was, you have like say like McDonald's, for example, they have kind of had a loyalty program where if you spend there, you get a certain amount of points back, and you can trade those points into items on the menu. What if you saw something where if you spent a certain amount of money in the parks, maybe you get an extra, blockout day or reservation day, kind of those kind of things to increase pass holder spending, that would reward them in some way. So I think that's kind of what we're dealing with here. It's not going to be like an annual pass holder program where it's like, hey, you buy a ticket for a year and you divide that among 12 months and so forth. No, it's probably going to be more of like a subscription platform. And I think that's where we're going.
And this may not have any relevance to do with it, but if you actually look at both sides, Disneyland is dealing with a whole nother different kind of beast than Walt Disney World, because Walt Disney World, as of right now, is not dealing with those kind of annual pass discrepancies that Disneyland's going forth with. But I wonder if there is a bigger goal in mind, as far as even like when they were releasing the ideas for Disneyland Forward. Even before that, they had mentioned about like with the mask mandate and the physical distancing and Disneyland, and everything. But Disney was already saying, we have bigger plans in mind. So I wonder if Disney's goal is to then treat Disneyland as Orange Grove had put it, like rather than make it just like a locals type of hangout, but a tourist destination. So that way they can get the city on their side to say, hey, we'll free up this land so you can move forward with the Disneyland project. Because I think that's the end term goal as far as with Disneyland goes. And I think this new annual pass program is the tip of the iceberg for that.
Yeah, exactly. This is an opportunity for Disney to break away, like you were saying, George, to break away from that locals mindset and become more of a tourist destination. Obviously, Disney still wants to have the locals to fill in the gaps for those off-season times of the year, but I think they want to have more balance. They want to get more of those tourism dollars, and this is a great opportunity to do that. It really is.
And to your point, George, that was the intention going all the way back to when the Disneyland Resort was founded in 2001. The idea was we're going to be a destination type place, and that balance never really happened. And they just kept fostering that annual pass holder relationship because they kind of needed to. And what that caused was kind of an imbalance of tourist versus local. And I think they really want to kind of balance that equation like you guys have alluded to. Look, the annual pass holders, there were 1 million of them. When you have a new attraction coming, or you have an event, or a celebration or something, and those 1 million guests want to descend to the park at the same time, you run into significant problems. From what I have heard, this is going back in 2015, they wanted to take that 1 million annual pass holder number and reduce it by half.
Wow.
That's kind of where they wanted to go. I think, though, that has changed with a reservation system type setup, in that you don't necessarily have to limit how many annual pass holders or annual passes, or in this case, loyalty programs that you sell. You just limit how frequently they can go. And I think that's where this will kind of shift the balance to make a park that's a little bit more, equitable? Something like that.
Yeah. I think a lot of annual pass holders are going to be upset with that. I think a lot of people are going to be upset because, here in Southern California, if you're an annual pass holder, it just you just come to expect being able to go to the parks whenever you want. And I agree with you, Vash. I think those days are over. Yeah,
I mean look, they're still going to need locals. They're still going to need the a kind of loyalty program or pass holder program in place. But yes, there will be a lot of people that will be upset. Look, speaking from personal experience, I went down the parks 1 year. It was actually around the opening of Tropical Hideaway. And so I remember being in Tropical Hideaway, meeting with kind of guests there and kind of seeing like what the response was and so forth. And we kind of spoke to a guest who was there who literally didn't have a job, who was getting Social Security checks and forwarding those straight towards her pass every single month. that's it's like, look, you can have opinions about that either way, but
Right.
I mean, it's from a company standpoint.
Yeah, I was just going to say, on a company standpoint, if you are running a business, if you look at it through a bigger perspective, and nothing against the locals of annual pass holders in California, so Orange Grove, don't cut me. But it's to the notion of speaking in a company standpoint, that would you then rather have someone that's traveling for a lengthy vacation who is willing to say, hey, you know what, we spent money, let's spend money on restaurants, on shopping, on better tickets, as to oppose to someone that may just go in for a few hours, vlog, video, take pictures, maybe buy a souvenir mug and then leave. So in a company standpoint, I could see why Disney is starting to lean more towards that for Disneyland, because that's how they get that revenue at World.
Well, and I'm really curious about like this loyalty program, because like to Vash's point, it sort of implies it's going to reward spending. So it's kind of like when you go, like my local boba place, I go there like 3 times a week to get boba, right? But they have these stamp cards, like every 10th boba, you get a free boba. So if it's something like that, where Disney's rewarding spending with free tickets for family and friends or things like that, that's going to push locals to spend more. That's going to make them say, hey, you know what? Let's stay at the Grand Cali or the Disneyland Hotel this time, because it's points for us.
It's almost like a permanent promotional deal of how Disney like used to do, like with the Year of a Million Dreams, and where they did sweepstakes where you could stay in the Disneyland Dream Suite or the Cinderella Castle Suite. So I think if they keep that, it's a good promotion on themselves. But as a permanent standpoint, it's like, well, yeah, if we're going to pay a little bit more for these passes, we're getting some benefits to it in the end.
Absolutely. And as you heard Bob Chapek during the earnings call, he's like, we haven't even scratched the surface. I mean, you could imagine where this could go. I mean, what if you had a point barrier that you spend a certain amount and you get maybe a Max Pass reservation? What if what if you spend past that point and you get access to a blockout date that you previously weren't going to get access to? It's those kinds of things that they're really looking towards is kind of, okay, how can we better prioritize guests who are going to spend money in the parks and allow access in a certain way behind certain kind of gated barriers that encourage guest spending. So it's really fascinating, really interesting, but it's going to be a seismic shift. And guys, unfortunately, this was coming. This was always kind of the intention. This is always where they wanted to go. It's just hitting us earlier than we ever thought.
Yeah. Hey, I'll do whatever I can as far as like if I need to do like the hole punch. It's like put me in that Tinkerbell costume and just let me go through that zip line like right behind the castle. Like that's.
There you go. You get yourself 1,000 points there.
Yeah. You heard it here first, Chapek. Disney Family Man, Tinkerbell outfit. Make it happen, Captain.
Absolutely.
But to the last segment we talked about, I talked about like there's always that friction between like the old guard and the new guard coming in, and it kind of applies here too. Mm-hmm. The old guard is the old pass system, right? The new guard is this new pass system, and there's gonna be a lot of angry people with this change. All these years of just having that pass system a certain way, and now it's drastically altered and more limiting. Yeah,
I think Disney is going to get some heat and burn with it, but also with the park pass system, we were all up in arms thinking, how is this going to work? Why? Because it was a creature of habit. We were just so used to going in to say, oh, we have our pass, we have our ticket. We could just walk in and come and go as we please. Well, now we can't do that anymore. But yet it's like if you want it that bad, it's like we end up making it adapt to our vacation or our time in the park. So I think in this situation, they're definitely going to have a lot of locals that are going to, give their strong opinion on it. But I think at the end of the day, they're going to still go for it anyway.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And honestly, let's be fair here. This kind of change needed to happen for quite some time. It was getting out of control. I mean, it really was. And so,
and as you said, Vash, it was planned like years ago. And I think just like with the current situation, it just pushed it up further for Disney to take forth on it.
As soon as we saw FlexPass, that was pretty much it. I mean, that's kind of where they wanted to go. It's just we got there in a couple of years rather than maybe a decade or so.
And really, I think a real turning point in this overcrowding problem at Disneyland Resort, I think what came around 2008 or 2009, if I believe, when they introduced the monthly payments. That's when things really took a turn for the worst.
Yeah.
I respect and like the fact that more people had access to the annual passes that couldn't afford it before. That's awesome. But at the same time, when you don't have to put, $1,400 up front and you can pay only $100 or so a month, it brings in huge amounts of annual pass holders, and there's crowding issues. And that was a real turning point, in my opinion. The monthly payments really, in a big way, contributed to the overcrowding problems that the Disneyland Resort had.
Massively. And really one of the most unfortunate aspects of that was the executives kind of, the TDA and so forth, they really got attached to that monthly revenue stream. So, and then they started factoring that into budgets and so forth. So unfortunately, it's just not going away, and that creates its own problems. I agree. I think that might have been a much better way to handle these issues than going to this extreme route. But again, with the pandemic, can we, re-envision how this program takes place? I think they went that route.
Yep. All right, fellas, let's pivot now to our next topic, which are masks. Masks at the Disney parks. So I believe it was yesterday, Disney World announced that the masks are no longer needed outdoors, but you will need them inside. Universal made their announcement, I believe, the day before. It was pretty soon. I think it was the day before Disney did. So this last week, there's been a huge shift in terms of masks. Vash, what are your thoughts on the mask situation going on here?
Man, it was 8:00 yesterday this time, and ran across the feed, and just joy upon joy. I mean, look, it's quite surprising. I think Disney may have gotten tipped off a little bit to what the CDC was going to do, but Bob Chapek on the earnings call of a report of an announcement that just came hours before alluded to, yeah, we'd like to go ahead and get rid of these things. I think it would be better for our guests who are going to the middle of Florida at 100 degrees and 100-degree humidity. Yeah, I think we can go ahead and look at that, and I think it'll be much better for the guest experience there. And he is absolutely correct. Now, again, there's wide-ranging implications for this, but for everybody who's concerned, this is the policy that parks in Europe have had since last summer. Okay, you wear your mask all in indoor locations or in settings where you could be crowded, and then in outdoor settings and common areas, you take it off. And it's I think it's natural to a lot of guests to kind of go from in their towns, you go from shop to shop, you go into indoor spaces, you put the mask on, you take it off as soon as you leave. I think it's a natural thing. I think it's a good thing. I think it's actually science driven, and it's going to be awesome to shed this thing in the Florida sun.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with you, brother. I 100% agree with you. Mr. Family Man, what are your thoughts on this new mask, policy going on?
You actually endured it, didn't you?
I honestly, I just have to say, burn, baby, burn. When I saw the quarterly earnings and Chapek was describing it and everything, and he was saying, well, yeah, as your point, Dre, when he was saying about, being in 95-degree heat in the middle of summer in Walt Disney World, people are going to be more comfortable this summer. Well, it doesn't take a psychic to know to say, pretty soon it's going to come. I did not think it was going to come that quick. It was like kablam. Universal said it, and then Disney just dropped the bomb. And then this morning, I get a notification from one of my co-hosts on the Grand Circle Tour podcast saying that Disney masks are now 75% off. Well, coming from a person who works in retail, anytime something goes on sale, especially that big of a percentage, that means they're not going to get any more new distribution of that item. So that tells me how much more quickly is it going to be when they start eliminating it completely indoors and outdoors.
Very interesting. Yeah, the 75% thing is a huge tell as to what they're thinking going forward. Yeah, I support this. It follows the science. The CDC guidelines state that, essentially the same thing. If you're outdoors, you don't need to wear the mask.
But remember now, this is coming from the same company that said wear the masks and everybody's for it, and then now taking off your mask, they must be out of their minds. It's like, hey, follow the guidelines, people.
Follow the guidelines. That's what the guidelines say. So look, listen, listen, it's. Look, they preface it saying, I know. This is like, there's so much movement here. Look, the preface is by saying, look, this is for vaccinated individuals, yes, but in Europe, before the vaccine even came out, they were doing this. I think it's very, very safe. We all know that theme parks in general haven't been vectors for spread in the way that maybe was envisioned before. We've known this for like a year now, so it just hasn't really materialized. And so taking this step, I think is a really, really good move. There's plenty of ventilation outdoors. It's just not the risk that maybe people kind of thought of it as being. And so it's just, wearing the mask when you're in the blazing sun, going from attraction to attraction, that's tough, and that's a huge impediment to people who are looking to book $6,000, $7,000 vacation packages and going to spend time in Orlando for a week. It's a huge barrier to entry.
And as we were saying before, what a better time to say it than during the quarterly earnings call, because it's like they're showing all this money and revenue that's coming in, and it's like, this is it. This is our mark. Let's go for it, because we can end up getting more for the next quarterly earnings.
Oh, absolutely. This is it. Go ahead. Want you?
Yeah. Oh, no. And I was just going to say that, for those people that feel it's too soon, to not wear a mask, you can still wear yours. And that's the beauty of this is that if you don't feel safe not wearing one, then wear one. So you have that option. So I think that's great.
Yeah, it's definitely optional. If you feel comfortable in a mask, you definitely can. Well, that wasn't always the case.
But I'll definitely say that with all the mask lifting and everything, I could probably know where a lot of them are going to be going when women start going to the water parks again. So you could have like a top bathing suit, and they could just connect the masks.
Well,
the CDC does not condone that, by the way.
I don't even think Disney does. But I mean, just looking at it now, have we heard any reports on whether anybody's able, I know, one of the big issues they were having was you could only eat when stationary, because that's the only time when you could actually, take off your mask and consume. Does anybody know if you can actually casually consume food while walking now outdoors?
I would think so, because if you can actually, be outdoors walking around, I really don't think it would be too much of a difference because either way, you're having your mask off. Right. Now, yeah. I think what they would probably have a problem with is you cannot eat or drink while being in line for an attraction, because it still states, even though the line may be outdoors, the second you walk through the entrance of a queue line, the mask goes on up until you leave the exit.
Correct. Yes. It's like a dog dash. The whole thing's outside. Doesn't matter. You got to wear your mask on there. Okay. But
compared to where we were, like literally 2 days ago, I'll take it.
Oh, absolutely. This is a huge, massive improvement. And so many queues are indoors and in air conditioning anyway. This is phenomenal. This is an absolutely
now. What are your thoughts on cast members still wearing masks? Even though that they had lifted the restrictions for the guests, cast members are still required to wear the mask. Now, I know that they kind of reduced down that they don't have to wear the mask and the shield at certain locations, but they are still required. So, what are you guys' thoughts on that?
Well, a friend of mine had a good point, and I think he might be right on this, where he was saying it might be a workers' comp issue with the
cast. That's what I was thinking. Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
So I think that's probably what's going on there.
Yeah, and to echo his points, that's what I heard as well, that it might be an issue related to workman's comp, OSHA, or some of those things that might be driving that decision. I think, though, again, not too far off from what I expect, especially in outdoor roles. I would be pretty confident in saying that. I just don't think they were ready at this moment to go that far. But going into the future here, like I said, masks might be coming off in more locations, which is great. But look, I'm going to two things. One is, can we get rid of plexiglass on some of these queues and ride vehicles? I mean, come on, man, this is crazy what they've gone through and done. Rise of Resistance and Mickey Mouse Runaway Railway, they're very much affected by some of these things. Can we at least get them to shed some of that? That would be a really great thing. And please, please, please bring back nightly entertainment, specifically fireworks. Please, Disney, let's do this.
Please, yes, 100%, Vash. And it's funny. My sister went to Walt Disney World a few months back, and she's obsessed with Frozen. She loves it. So she went on that Frozen Ever After ride in Epcot. And she said that the plexiglass, they put the plexiglass right in front of you. And it's a water ride. So you can't even see anything. The water's all over the plexiglass.
Yep.
And it totally blocks your view of everything. It's like, it's terrible show.
Well, and it does
know how much that even protects anything.
Well, and now with them, starting to fill up every car, every seat, I think, and even with now to Disney raising the capacity level. I mean, and that was the other thing that
that's another thing too.
That he said, at Walt Disney World, they started out at 35%. And he said, and even before the CDC news, we were already raising capacity. So now we're going to even raise it even more.
Right.
So I think, to your discretion, Dre, I think as far as with like the fireworks and the entertainment, they're going to have to start bringing them back, because with a higher capacity, they're going to have places and locations to put all these guests.
Right. And there are, for nighttime entertainment specifically, there are reasons why you do have these shows go off. I mean, if you want to bring back restaurants like Ohana or some of the other food locations, especially in the evening hours, you really need those entertainment offerings to really extend that day out. So there is a kind of a financial incentive to do this, and I think they will. It's just, man, gotta get these back here. But yeah, I mean, like you were saying, OG, I mean, it's just like, it's crazy how these plexiglass dividers have really affected those experiences, and if we can get a reduction on that, that'd be great. Also, too, like outdoor queues, there are some, like the queue for Big Thunder Mountain Railroad at Walt Disney World. From what I understand, it does have a lot of plexiglass within it. And from what I understand, it's like a nightmare to be in that queue with that much plexiglass. There's no ventilation whatsoever. It's very stuffy. We can get rid of some of those things as well, which probably do more hindrance than good.
Yeah, absolutely. So now I want to pivot to our very, very last topic. And this is just more of an opinion-based thing. I mean, kind of a quick little thing. I wanted to talk about Bob Chapek real quick. He's been on the job now for it's been a little over a year or so. In light of that Variety article that just came out a few days ago and what have you, Vash, I wanted to ask you, going forward, what kind of CEO do you envision, in your opinion, Chapek is going to be? What kind of CEO? What kind of leader?
I don't. How can I say this? I don't see him as being a very ambitious CEO. I will say, I think we've had discussions with this like this before, but I think within those discussions, kind of a treading water CEO. I think you made the comparison to Tim Cook and Apple and how that was going from Steve Jobs. That's kind of a disparity there. I think that's where we're headed towards. That doesn't say that there won't be great stuff out of this era of Disney. I think there will be, and I will say that some of these things have been significantly hindered by what was going on. By what's been happening in the world over the last year and a half or so. So we really haven't seen the fruits of what his plans are kind of play out. He just, it's all about just like staying afloat at this point, more than anything. So we really haven't given him a chance, I think. Now, look, if you look at the Parks division, the Parks Experiences and Parks division of the company, they were spending like $25 billion at one point from all their capital expenditures all around the world. So I don't think he's adverse to spending money. I think there is ambition there. It's going to be really interesting to see where we go from here. But I don't think if you look at the huge gains, the huge acquisitions of the Bob Iger era, I don't think that's where this is.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. That's where I stand. I mean, I don't think he's going to completely destroy the Walt Disney Company, but I don't think he's going to be, as visionary as a Bob Iger. Tim Cook is the best example that I could find. Tim Cook came out right after Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs was incredibly visionary, literally changed the world. So he kind of like Tim Cook, he kept Apple going, but there hasn't been any, oh my God, wow innovations coming out of Apple really since he's took over. Everything is like, yeah, we're going to make the iPad bigger. We're going to make it smaller. We're going to give you multiple colors now. Now it comes in rose gold and red and green, right? That's basically the Tim Cook era, where Steve Jobs was like all about really changing everything up. And I think Chapek will be similar to that. He's not going to destroy Disney, but there's not going to be any groundbreaking, amazing innovations to come out really of his tenure. I think it's just going to be kind of like keeping things the way they are, as we go. Mr. Family Man, what are your thoughts going forward of Bob Chapek? What kind of leader do you think he's going to be going forward?
Yeah, I kind of agree with both of you. I think he's just the type that, does he have a lot of flaws? He does. Are there certain things that kind of gripes me about him? Yes. But I think it's to the notion of you're never going to get the same kind of outcome from one CEO to another. They're all going to bring something different to the plate, where he may better something that we're not even thinking of right now today. He may, in the time coming, he may, alter something to say, hey, we didn't think about doing this, but this actually works. And I think, giving him at least the opportunity that, he was being overshadowed by Iger and the success that he's done with all the acquisitions and everything, and Iger still being part of the company. Well, once Iger leaves and he has the full helm of the ship, so to speak, and now that with the global shutdown and the pandemic is starting to kind of deviate from the world, and it's like now it could give him the opportunity to say, okay, let me show you what I can do. To your point, Orange Grove, do I feel that he's going to do something immaculate? No, I don't think. I think it's more so going to be the stems of the company, Walt Disney Imagineering, the studios are going to say, you know what, we have ideas. What do you think of this? And he's pretty much the kind of, if he likes it, he'll go along with it. He'll sign off on it, and, he'll be on board. But I don't think that he's the kind that will kind of have that leadership quality to say, you know what, I'm going to make this gigantic alter change to the company, good or bad. I think it's just pretty much going to be a level playing field.
Yeah, and I'm all about giving these people a chance. I'm all about having an open mind because, I remember years ago when Bob Iger announced that Tom Staggs, the chief financial officer of the Walt Disney Company, the head bean counter, was going to be the head of the parks and resorts. A lot of fans were very upset about that. This is a finance guy, he's going to be terrible at running the parks. And really, honestly, I thought he was great. We got a lot of great.
I did too. Honestly, I was crushed to the fact that he lost the opportunity to even become CEO, because I think during that time he would have done really well. And I think even Staggs would have done very well as far as being in this predicament right now that we are with the finances, like within the company. I think he would have done great.
I think he would have done great too. So I'm all about having an open mind. And even Chapek, I see a lot of fans kind of criticize like he's stiff on camera and stuff, and he is. Believe me, he's super awkward on camera. But I think we have to be careful in comparing Chapek to Bob Iger. They're completely two different situations. Bob Iger started his entire career off as a weatherman. So, of course, he's going to have the charisma thing. He's going to have that camera presence, and he's going to be very comfortable. He's got the perfect hair, the great smile, because that's what he started off as. You know, he started off in front of the camera.
But honestly, I'm being sarcastic here, but honestly, with Chapek, if you were to put him on a Disney attraction, you'd need a teleprompter just to tell him how to scream.
Yeah, you would. I mean, he's very, very, he doesn't have that same charisma, and I don't expect him to, given his background. It's just not the same situation.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
I think in time, like within a time frame, I think even like with Bob Iger, as much as he has done for the company, I really think it's his time to pass the torch on, so to speak. I think like after so long, you need to have a little bit of a shakeup because each individual person has their own vision, has a different way, a different perspective of running things.
Yeah.
You know, so
I actually agree. I mean, it's you know, I think Bob Iger may have left a little bit too late. I think he may have you know, might have done better. Especially, I mean, I know he's very much his legacy. It means a lot to him. I think for those reasons, may have been better to leave maybe a couple of years before he did. And you know, there's some controversy about him, his timing and so forth. But I think Chapek, I mean, he's kind of the more Wall Street guy. He's kind of the business part of show business, and that comes with its advantages and comes with its disadvantages. And I'm worried about a few aspects. I'm concerned. I know, Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, how ambitious it was going to be. From what I understand, some of those things got cut. I'm not saying Bob Chapek was directly responsible, but from what I've heard, that might be the case. I don't know. We'll see. We'll definitely see. I am very, very optimistic. Then again, it is Bob Chapek, so we'll see.
Yeah. It's going to be very, very interesting to see how this company is under a Bob Chapek, leadership role, because really, I mean, we're not going to know until after Bob Iger leaves, because Bob Iger still has an enormous amount of power in the company.
He does. Yeah.
So after December, and we're getting into the new year, I think we're gonna see Chapek's true colors, for better or worse. It's
and then after that, if need be, then we can give him the whole goofy size shoe boot.
Right. Well, I'll tell you what, George. I mean, if we start seeing major problems in the Walt Disney Company, let's say, for example, and it's just hypothetical, let's say a year and a half, 2 years from now, right? Because of the policy that Chapek laid out, Kevin Feige, the head of Marvel, is like, you know what? I'm done with this. I'm not dealing with this. I want out. You might see something like that. You might see the board say, you know what, Chapek, you're not cutting it, buddy. And we can't afford to lose Kevin Feige over this. It might be another Eisner circa 2000.
That's what I was just going to say. It might be, if it comes down to it, it may come down. History repeats itself, just like with Eisner.
If you start seeing some big creatives, like you said, somebody like a Kevin Feige, I know he's more of a producer, but if you start seeing some big name talent walk out the door and that stock price fall and keep at those levels, he might be out of there quickly, more quickly than Bob Iger or Michael Eisner.
Wow, that's incredible. I would love to get an honest, this real candid answer from Bob Iger about why he chose Chapek. And I'm not throwing shade at Chapek or anything. I'm just what?
Honestly, if you really want my opinion, because I've been following it, I really think that they, and I hate to say this, but they had some tough decisions of who would really be able to replace Iger, because in my mind, I thought it was going to be Staggs. After Staggs didn't get the option to become CEO, he left. And it was like, well, who else is there? And it almost feels like that it's like that last man pick, so to speak, on the baseball field. And it's like, well, who is left? And I don't know. Maybe it was just Chapek.
See, that's the problem with the acquisitions. Some of them, they've created very disproportionately sized shareholders with a lot of influence and control and power. And unfortunately, Tom Staggs was a victim of that, from what I understand. And yeah, like you said, I mean, he is kind of last choice because the board couldn't decide. The board couldn't, decide, really agree on who should be who should be next. And unfortunately, Bob Chapek was the guy. Look, there are some notions. I've heard like some kind of like, this is like some rumor, almost, look, take this with a huge grain of salt, but I've heard like, oh, maybe Chapek was selected because if he doesn't get through the pandemic and it can all be kind of foisted on him and as a result and so forth. But I think he really did perform better than expected. So I don't know if that's completely true, but I mean, it's just, there's a lot of dynamics here. There's a lot of shifting tug of war, kind of thing. And I think Chapek he's asserting dominance right now. And honestly, I think he has the numbers to back up that what they did during this time was the right call, and they, exceeded expectations when it comes to just their operating losses and so forth. And I think once those things are kind of cast out, I think we'll start to see really what Bob Chapek has in mind.
What I was actually rooting for, I actually wouldn't have minded Tom Staggs, but once he left, I was really rooting for Kevin Meyer. Because I mean, he was kind of, for those of you not familiar at home, Kevin Meyer was the acquisitions guy. He was Bob Iger's right-hand man with the Lucasfilm acquisition, the Marvel acquisition, the Pixar acquisition. This guy was with Bob Iger the entire step of the way during all those major acquisitions, which was a huge part of Bob Iger's legacy, really. I really thought Bob Iger was going to go with Kevin Meyer. And then when it was announced he went with Chapek, I'm like, I don't know what Kevin Meyer did or didn't do to not get that job, but I really did feel like he was a shoo-in. I don't know how he bungled that opportunity. Vash, are you surprised by that too at all? Or
I was very surprised by that, and I really want to know what the board thinks of Chapek and how they were able to sign off on something like that, and why Kevin Meyer wasn't the guy. I mean, well, look. Kevin Meyer's first instinct was to go to TikTok. I don't think that worked out too well in the way that he had envisioned. So I don't know. Maybe instinctually he didn't have the best instincts. I don't know. We could kind of. I mean, it is kind of strange. It's like why the numbers guy? Why the I don't know. I mean, I guess we should have foreseen it when he was taken from consumer products and placed into the role of Parks and Resorts. Then that's when he did the whole merger of and made the Parks Experiences and Parks division and so forth, and how that relationship was going to be fostered because of that merger. I think we should have, we probably should have been like, okay, this is probably going to be the guy. But even then, I think it came as a lot of shock to people because they just couldn't envision this guy being in this role.
Yeah, I couldn't either. I think it was really weird. It was a really odd decision. Yeah, really odd. But thank you guys for coming on. I appreciate both of you as always. We're going to start off with Vash. Vash, where can they find you on social media?
Best place to find me or interact with me, I should say, is on Twitter. So it's at VashSky. It's right down. Wait, I'm going to get it right. Okay, they're right there. Yep. And then, I'm doing videos on your channel on Orange Go 55 under the moniker Freshly Squeezed, where it's your source for fresh and juicy content squeezed right from the grove. So that's where I at. So hopefully I can get a new video out here soon. I know it's taken a little while. I do apologize. It's coming.
Perfect. Looking forward to it. And Mr. Family Man, where can they find you on social media?
You can find me on YouTube at... I'm going to get it right one of these times. It's like DisneyFamilyMan23 is my YouTube channel. You can also find me on Twitter at DisneyGeorge, also on Instagram, and also I'm part of the Grand Circle Tour podcast. And I have to say, definitely check out these guys' content because it's so good. It's especially with Orange Grove, he is the OG of the OJ.
Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Thank you both for coming on. It's always a pleasure. And thank you all for watching. Comment below with your thoughts on the earnings call, the Variety article, Disney annual pass loyalty program, Bob Chapek, everything we discussed. Comment below. We'd love to hear your opinions. Thank y'all so much for watching, and have a wonderful, wonderful day. Bye-bye, y'all.